He taught me so much about this city.
Forgive me.
The night was quiet, too quiet for Lagos. Richard's mother stood on the bridge, her eyes glinting beneath the moonlight. Beside her, Richard laughed softly, talking about his father, the man who'd built everything they had. Then, suddenly, she pushed him. The splash echoed like thunder across the dark river. Her face didn't flinch. No scream. No tears. Just silence and a whispered prayer for forgiveness she didn't mean. Hours later, a fisherman pulled a lifeless body from the water. But when Richard's eyes flickered open, he remembered everything. The cold hands that shoved him, the voice that said, "Forgive me, my son." That was the night everything changed. That was the night a son's love died and a survivor was born. And that's where his story truly began. Before we dive deeper, please, if you're listening to this right now, I want to prove my mom wrong. She said I can't even reach 1,000 subscribers. Help me show her that stories like this matter. Subscribe to King's Folklore, and let's keep breathing life into tales that refuse to die. Now let's continue. Rain had just stopped falling when Richard Johnson opened the car door for his mother. The scent of wet asphalt mixed with her perfume, strong, expensive, familiar. The bridge shimmered under the moonlight, and the city lights danced in the water below. It was supposed to be a quiet night, a night of remembrance for his late father, the man whose death had left a hole in their world. "Mom," Richard said softly, "Dad always loved this view. Remember how he used to stop here after meetings?" She smiled faintly. But there was something behind that smile. Something sharp, trembling. "Yes," she whispered. "He always said the bridge reminded him of strength and endings." Richard didn't catch the second word. He was too busy staring into the distance, thinking of his father's laughter, his warmth, and the empire he'd built, Johnson Properties International. He didn't know that empire was the reason his mother couldn't sleep at night. When his father's will was read 2 months ago, the revelation shocked everyone. Richard was named sole heir to 90% of the estate. His mother only 10%. She smiled politely that day, holding his hand before the lawyers and cameras. But behind that graceful smile was a storm. A storm she had fed for years. The feeling of being overlooked, undervalued, unseen. "Your father trusted you more than he trusted me," she once told Richard. "Even when I was the one who stood beside him, when he had nothing." Richard thought it was just grief speaking. But grief doesn't whisper plans. It doesn't arrange secret meetings or hire men who ask no questions. That night on the bridge, she asked him to meet her alone. No driver, no guards, just the two of them, to talk. Richard, still mourning, wanted to believe his mother just needed closure. He wanted to be her comfort. They stood there for minutes, watching the waves below. Then she asked quietly, "Do you ever think maybe some people don't deserve what they're given?" Richard frowned. "What do you mean?" She turned to him, tears in her eyes, real tears this time. "You remind me too much of him. You even talk like him. Do you know how much I gave up for that man? And in the end, I was nothing." "Mom." But before he could finish, she shoved him. No hesitation, no scream. Just a push, smooth, almost gentle. The world flipped, water crashed, darkness swallowed him whole. When Richard woke up, he was coughing beside a muddy riverbank. His body shivered uncontrollably. He could barely remember where he was. Then, flashes came her face, the push, the sound of the splash. He was alive somehow. A fisherman, an older man named Musa, found him tangled in debris near the river bend. "You're lucky, young man," Musa said, pulling him up. "God must love you very much. That fall should have taken your soul." Richard didn't speak for hours. He stared blankly at the horizon as dawn broke. He wasn't ready to believe it. His mother had tried to kill him. Days later, the news spread. Billionaire heir missing, presumed drowned. His mother cried on camera, giving statements to the media. She was heartbroken, reporters said. A loving mother grieving her only son. But behind closed doors, she celebrated quietly with her brother Uncle Tund. "Finally," she whispered, sipping champagne. "The company will be ours now." She didn't know Richard was watching from afar, alive, hiding, broken but breathing. He needed answers. He needed the truth. Richard turned to the one man he could still trust, Peter, his father's old security chief. When Peter saw him, his jaw dropped. Jesus Christ, Richard, we buried an empty coffin. Richard's voice cracked. She tried to kill me, Peter. My own mother. Why? Peter hesitated. His eyes darted away. You weren't supposed to find out this way. Richard stepped closer. Find out what? Peter swallowed hard. Your father didn't die of a heart attack. He was poisoned. By your mother. And your uncle. They wanted everything. The world tilted again. His legs almost gave out. Poisoned? His father murdered? The bridge, the push, the fake tears, it all made sense now. For 2 weeks, Richard stayed hidden, moving between safe houses, guided by Peter. His body healed slowly. But his heart? That was another story. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face. The face that once kissed his forehead before school, the same face that smiled when he got his first job. How does a son stop loving his mother? How does he carry both love and hatred in the same heart? Peter told him there were files, documents his father had kept, evidence of the conspiracy, hidden somewhere in the old Johnson factory outside town. He knew they'd come for him one day, Peter said. He wanted you to have the truth if anything happened. Richard clenched his fists. Then that's where I'm going next. He looked toward the sunrise, his expression hardening. The boy who loved his mother was gone. The man who would uncover the truth had just been born. What would you do if the person who raised you became your worst enemy? The story of Richard Johnson had only begun, and the bridge that almost became his grave would soon become the first chapter in his fight for justice. The old Johnson factory stood like a ghost on the outskirts of Lagos, half buried in rust, silence, and secrets. Richard arrived before dawn, guided only by Peter's directions, and a heart that refused to stop pounding. The factory had once produced tiles and steel rods for his father's construction empire. Now, it was nothing but dust, broken glass, and the echo of betrayal. Somewhere here, Peter's voice echoed softly beside him. Your father told me if anything ever happened, I should find a locked cabinet in his old office. He said what's inside could destroy a dynasty. The two men stepped carefully, flashlights sweeping over the walls. Rats scurried, wind whistled through cracks, and Richard's heart grew heavier with every step. It wasn't long before they found a steel cabinet behind a fallen portrait of his father. It was secured by a rusted combination lock, untouched for years. Peter handed him the code written on an old paper note. Your father gave me this, he whispered. He trusted me to give it to you when the time came. The lock clicked open. Inside were documents, bank statements, and a small USB drive. But what caught Richard's eye most was a single sheet with his mother's signature authorization for a transfer of ownership of multiple Johnson subsidiaries to her brother, Tund, dated one day before his father's death. His stomach turned. Peter. This proves it. Peter nodded grimly. It proves everything. But son, you need to be careful. Once they know you're alive, they'll come for you again. Richard took a deep breath. Then we take this to the police. He didn't know that was his biggest mistake. Chief Okoro, head of the Lagos crime division, had been his father's friend. The man attended family dinners, gave him birthday gifts, and promised to look after the family after his father passed. If there was anyone Richard believed he could trust, it was him. When he and Peter walked into Okoro's office, the chief rose in shock. Richard? He rushed forward, pretending joy. By God's mercy, you're alive. Your mother thought you were gone. Richard forced a smile. I know, Chief. That's why I'm here. She tried to kill me. I need your help. The chief's expression hardened just slightly. That's a serious accusation, my boy. Peter laid the documents on the table. Everything's here. Bank transfers, call logs, the truth about Mr. Johnson's death. Okoro scanned through the pages, nodding slowly. This is heavy evidence. Then he smiled faintly. Leave it with me. I'll start an internal investigation first thing tomorrow. But as they left his office, Peter whispered, He's lying. He's too calm. That night, Richard couldn't sleep. He sat in the small room Peter had rented for them, listening to every creak and sound outside. Around midnight, his phone buzzed an unknown number. He answered cautiously. "Hello?" A woman's voice whispered, "Richard, run. They know." Then the line went dead. Seconds later, bang. The window shattered. A bullet tore through the wall. Peter dove for cover, pulling Richard to the ground. "They found us," he shouted. Another shot. Then another. Richard's heart raced. He grabbed Peter's arm. "We need to move now." They escaped through the back door, sprinting into the dark streets, chased by headlights and gunfire. By the time they reached the highway, Peter's arm was bleeding. "Keep going," he gasped. "Don't stop for me." But Richard refused to leave him. He dragged him into a drainage ditch, waiting for the cars to pass. When silence finally returned, Peter looked at him with weary eyes. "I told you. Okoro's part of it. He's working for your mother." Richard's chest tightened. Why? Why would he risk everything for her? Peter coughed weakly. "Power, boy. Power and money. Your mother promised him a seat in the boardroom once you were gone." By dawn, Peter's condition worsened. They found shelter in an abandoned church by the outskirts of Aja. Rain poured again, thunder rolling like the anger in Richard's heart. He sat beside Peter, whispering, "I swear, I'll finish this. For Dad. For you." Peter smiled faintly. "Your father believed in you, Richard. Remember what he always said. Forgiveness doesn't mean weakness. It means you're free." Then Peter's breathing slowed. His hand slipped from Richard's grasp. Silence filled the church. For the first time, Richard cried not as an heir, not as a victim, but as a man losing his last ally. He buried Peter behind the church the next morning, marking the grave with a simple stone. "You were more of a father to me than the world will ever know," he whispered. After the burial, Richard decided he wouldn't hide anymore. If the police and his mother wanted war, they would get it, but he'd fight with truth, not bullets. He reached out to a journalist named Ada, a fearless investigative reporter who had once interviewed his father. Meeting her in a quiet cafe, he handed her a copy of the files. "If anything happens to me," he said, "make this public." Ada studied him carefully. "You're walking a dangerous line, Richard. Are you sure you want this out?" He nodded. "I've already died once. I'm not afraid to die again." That evening, news broke. New allegations in Johnson estate. Suspicious death of billionaire, may have been foul play. The headlines exploded. His mother panicked. Chief Okoro called a press conference, denying any wrongdoing. But it was too late. Ada had already shared the recordings, the bank statements, the signatures. Richard's phone buzzed with a final message from a blocked number. "You think you've won? You have no idea what I'm capable of, Mom?" He stared at the screen, heart cold, yet calm. "Then I'll be ready," he whispered. The war had just begun. Have you ever trusted someone so deeply, only to learn they were working against you all along? Richard's world was collapsing again, but this time, he wouldn't run. Because sometimes survival isn't enough. Sometimes, you have to fight for the truth, even if it destroys everything you love. The city was louder than usual that morning, reporters shouting, sirens wailing, camera flashes cutting through the air like lightning. The Johnson scandal had gone viral. Every station, every blog, every conversation in Lagos buzzed with one name, Mrs. Beatrice Johnson. Richard sat in the back seat of Ada's old Toyota, watching chaos unfold from a distance. Police vans lined up outside the Johnson mansion, the same home he'd grown up in. The marble pillars looked colder now, stripped of their pride. He could almost see his father's shadow through the window, proud, smiling, a ghost of everything once beautiful that greed had destroyed. Ada looked over at him. "You don't have to be here, Richard." "I do," he said quietly. "I need to see it end." Inside the mansion, Chief Okoro stood beside Mrs. Johnson, his face stiff, his uniform neat. But his eyes betrayed fear. He had been exposed, too. The files Ada leaked had included his name, his bank account, his messages to Mrs. Johnson. His voice trembled as he tried to address the media. "This is a misunderstanding," he lied. "A manipulation." But before he could finish, Detectives from Abuja's anti-corruption unit stepped in. One placed handcuffs on his wrists. Another read his rights aloud. Mrs. Johnson gasped. "Chief, do something. You promised." But the chief looked at her with cold eyes. "You used me, Beatrice." She slapped him. The crowd erupted with flashes and murmurs. Richard stepped forward. For the first time in months, mother and son stood face to face. Her eyes widened in disbelief. "Richard? No. No, it can't be. I saw you fall, He interrupted, voice steady. "You pushed me." She froze. Reporters leaned in. Her lips trembled, but no sound came. "I didn't mean to," she whispered finally. I just wanted what was mine. After all I gave your father, he left me with nothing. Nothing, Richard." Richard took a step closer. "You had everything. You had love. You had me. But you threw it all away for money that'll rot in someone else's hands." She broke down, knees hitting the marble floor. "I lost him first, and then I lost myself." The officers approached, lifting her to her feet. "Mrs. Johnson, you are under arrest for attempted murder, fraud, and conspiracy in the death of Mr. Johnson." As they led her away, she turned to Richard. Tears streaked her face. "Can you ever forgive me?" Richard's throat tightened. He wanted to hate her, he had every reason to. But in that moment, all he saw was a broken woman trapped in her own greed. He whispered, barely audible, "I already did." Weeks later, the mansion felt like a graveyard. Empty halls, covered furniture, the smell of dust replacing the perfume and laughter that once filled it. Richard stood by his father's study window, looking out at the city that now knew every dark corner of his family's name. Ada entered quietly. "The trial's set for next month," she said. "You don't have to attend if you don't want to." "I'll be there," he replied. "I need to see it through. But after that, I'm done." Ada smiled faintly. "What will you do next?" He exhaled slowly. "Start fresh. Build something my father would be proud of. Not from revenge, but from purpose." He placed his father's photo back on the desk, beside the final words his father had once written in a note. "The legacy of a man isn't his wealth. It's what survives in the hearts he touched." Richard smiled sadly. "Maybe I'm finally starting to understand that." 1 month later, outside the courthouse, reporters crowded as Mrs. Johnson was escorted into the van. Her face was pale, her eyes distant. When she looked at Richard standing nearby, she gave a faint nod, as if to say thank you. He nodded back. No words, no anger, just peace. As the van doors closed, Ada touched his shoulder. "You did the right thing, you know." He nodded. "Maybe. Or maybe I just chose to stop fighting ghosts." They walked away, leaving the noise behind the cameras, the whispers, the past. Weeks turned into months. The Johnson estate slowly reopened, this time run as a foundation for widows and children in need. Richard dedicated it to his father's memory and to forgiveness. Every Sunday he visited the small church in Aja where Peter was buried. Sometimes he brought flowers. Sometimes he just sat there in silence. One day a little boy playing nearby asked, "Sir, are you praying for someone?" Richard smiled softly. "No, son. I'm thanking God for saving me." The boy grinned. "Then he must really love you." Richard looked up at the sky, calm, endless, forgiving. "Yeah," he whispered. "He really does." What would you do if the person who broke you asked for forgiveness? Would you walk away? Or would you choose peace? Because sometimes, victory isn't proving them wrong, it's healing when you could have hated. Richard chose peace, and that made him richer than any fortune he could inherit. Moral of the story: greed can turn love into poison, but forgiveness can turn pain into power. Richard's story reminds us that no matter how deep the wound, healing begins the moment you choose peace over vengeance. He lost everything: his wealth, his family, his innocence. But he found the one thing money could never buy: freedom from hatred. If this story touched you, hit that subscribe button for more emotional tales from King's Folklore. And even if it didn't, come on, subscribe anyway, we'll win you over next time. Drop a comment, like the video, and let's keep the stories alive. Thanks for watching.